And welcome to the Americans podcast. Tommy Daniels here in the presence of a legend, a Texas Radio Hall of Famer, and of course, a resident of Dunkirk, New York. Not many people know where that is, but Norm definitely does. He called it home for many years, and a longtime friend and guy I had the pleasure of working with for many years at the Ticket, the one and only Mr. Norm Hitzges. How are you handling all this craziness, Norm?
I'm doing great, TD. Doing great. I miss traveling, which is my favorite hobby. I miss that. I can't tell you how many times over the last few weeks, Mary and I have looked at each other and started talking. Don't you wish we were at that waterfall whose name we couldn't pronounce in Iceland? Or don't you wish we were driving down the west coast of New Zealand? Or the many places we've gone? That's what we really miss these days.
Well, and hopefully, Norm, sooner than later, we'll be getting back to, traveling and all those things. And for me, my life is traveling. I'm with a hockey team on a bus for about 6 months out of the year. And, we're a little worried about maybe starting late, but, hopefully everything will back to normal here very soon. But I didn't come to talk about me. I want to talk about Norm. And, you started sports talk radio back in the day. Now, you were doing a show at KLIF back when there wasn't the internet, there wasn't, Twitter and Facebook. So I guess for the sports fan out there listening, how do you do a show without Twitter and Facebook?
I don't know. I still don't do one. I've never been into social media. In fact, yesterday, Frito, set up everything for me over the years. Yesterday, I finally got the password to my own Twitter account, and for the first time ever on Monday, Memorial Day, sent out a Twitter note of my own along with a picture.
Wow. That is historical.
Am I moving into the new age of America or what?
Well, let me tell you something, Norm. If you did a show all those years without Facebook and Twitter, and your show is second to none in DFW, the best. I think we can all survive without social media here and there. But I want to start with something topical. The Phil Tiger Brady Manning the other day, and nobody knew what that was going to be like. A lot of people said, "Oh, you're going to lose interest because you can't switch to some other guy on 18 about to make a birdie." But that was pretty entertaining golf, a pretty entertaining watch the entire way. Don't you agree?
I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was just fantastic. I thought it was wonderful how Manning and Brady had fun, poked fun at each other, allowed people to poke fun at themselves. I just enjoyed every minute of it. It was just a wonderful event. It raised a ton of money for COVID-19 relief. I can think of only one way that America may have tuned in even more, and that's if the teams had been Mickelson and Brady versus Tiger and Trump. Given what we know about the president's golf game, I think we may have broken all records for television viewing as we watched him take 177 shots on national television.
You know what? And don't rule that out for somewhere down the road. The president likes to be in the spotlight, and I would not be surprised if somewhere down the road that is not a made-for-TV event. A lot to cover here with you because I want to go back to some of the early days. I want to start with a couple of the things that I know you were covering and a part of. Let's start with the Tom Landry firing. What was it like that day to be a media member in DFW?
It was coming. We all knew it was coming. In fact, kind of oddly, had the club not been sold, I don't know how long Coach Landry would have continued to coach, quite honestly. The Cowboys were backsliding desperately at that point, desperately. And bless his wonderful soul, Tommy, one of Tom Landry's, I think if you could call it weak points, if this is such a thing, was he hung on to players for too long. He long after their expiration date as NFL players, they still had a cowboy uniform and they were still playing. And that led to some of the decline. And when Jerry Jones took over that team, that was a bad football team. And it was going to be a bad football team if Tom Landry continued to coach it. And in an odd way, Tommy, I'm not certain that as awful as a moment as that was for a lot of sports fans in this area and around the country, Tom Landry got fired. Well, I'm not so sure there wouldn't have been some difficult parting of the ways another year or two down the road if Dallas continued to spiral toward the bottom of the league. And believe me, this was a bottom of the league football team when Jerry Jones bought it.
You are an author as well in one of the great books. If you haven't had a chance to read it, The Greatest Team Ever. Talk about the Cowboys and just throw this scenario out here. Let's say there's not a parting of the ways between Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones. How many championships could this team have won if Jimmy stays on board?
Holy cow. First of all, that's something we'll never know. Secondly, that team had sustained to win 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, despite the fact that NFL free agency was starting to enter the league. I know a lot of people feel this thing would have gone on forever. I'm not sure that's true, Tommy. I'm just not sure that that's true. The way the league was making it harder for NFL teams to retain free agents and then sign replacement players. For instance, in the last 3, I believe it's 3 years that Jimmy was the coach here, this team lost 25 free agents and signed 7. I don't know if I think they'd have been better in the long run, without question. Would they have won another 2? Well, they continued on under Switzer to win, put another one in the bag. I think it's very possible they could have won 4 in that situation. I would stretch it to say 5, because at that point you would have to be imagining Michael Irvin not getting hurt. You would have to be imagining Emmitt Smith not slowly on the decline. And quite honestly, Troy Aikman, the beating he took in his early years was starting to wear on him a little bit as those years went on.
A couple other topics of interest from your early years of talk show host in DFW, the SMU probation, the big SMU scandal.
Oh.
What was that mess like to cover back in the day?
It was incredible. All of us, and I include everybody in loosely in the term of journalism, all of the journalists in this area then, remember 2 newspapers, talk show hosts, not many, TV sports, not a lot, but some important faces in TV sports at the time. Everybody was looking for information. And by the way, information was available everywhere because, Tommy, one of the things that marked that scandal, if I can use that, was the fact that, man, the people from SMU did not do a good job of editing themselves. They talked to loads of different people. They talked to people in bars. They talked to people in phones. They just talked to people. And all of us had sources we were talking to at that time who were sources of some value or lesser value that were leaks in that situation. And the thing we must remember, SMU got caught and punished. That meant everybody else in the conference got away except TCU. They got caught and punished also. The problem at TCU, as opposed to SMU, is TCU didn't even know how to buy good players. SMU bought good players.
We did. Yeah.
And it was crazy, Tom. It was just crazy. And hey, any of you Texas people or Oklahoma people or Texas Tech people or A&M people, don't be smirking out there. You were bidding on the same players. Let's be frank here. You know, the people at SMU, they simply didn't cover their tracks very well.
Moody Madness, and do you ever remember how did that come about? What was at Reunion Arena that kept the Mavericks out of their building?
Tommy, that's one I don't remember very well, quite honestly. I tell you what, we were all so thrilled to finally have a basketball team that could play, have one that was competitive. But that's one I don't remember terribly well, honestly.
And that was obviously, if I remember watching some of those games on TV during the Ro Blackman and Brad Davis, era back in the late '80s. But that was such a neat part of the Mavericks history, and I talked to Norm Sanju about that a couple times, recently over the last couple of years. And you had a career in basketball announcing for the Mavericks. You were part of that early on, weren't you not?
Yeah, several years. We were part. I was part of that. And looking back now, you can adjust your eyesight through the lenses of history, and you think to yourself, what misfortune the Mavericks had to be running up against the Lakers all the time.
Yeah.
Because the Maverick team of Harper, Blackman, and Aguirre, Sam Perkins, those are really Brad Davis, those were really, really good players. They just couldn't ever get past the Lakers because the Lakers, my goodness, the talent the Lakers had those years. You run to the Magic and Worthy and Michael Cooper and all those types and the Mavericks simply couldn't ever fully climb that mountain.
And before the Mavericks came here, it's funny because this is the one thing that I didn't know, but Norm Sanju, their old president, told me is that he was trying to move the Buffalo Braves here, and he had met with Mayor Bob Folsom, and that crazy switch. I don't know if anybody will remember this, but for whatever reason, this always sticks in my memory. The only time in sports I think that you've had two owners swap franchises, and John Brown and Harry Ben-Gurion. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Buffalo and San Diego swap franchises.
Yeah, and the Braves went to San Diego. Of course, later would become the Clippers. But yeah, Norm Sanju had come to Dallas and try to move the then Buffalo Braves here.
Well, when the Mavericks finally did get here, of course, the Chaparrals were here first.
Right.
And I can remember going to Chaparrals games, and some nights it would have been easier to introduce the crowd. It was a little sparse some nights there, but there was a base of basketball fan here, and the Mavericks, once they achieved some success, have since then had a remarkably loyal core, and that loyal core had to hang out through the 90s. I mean, I saw a note the other day that if you take the winning percentages of all of the teams of all of the four major sports in the 90s, we had the privilege of seeing the worst pro sports team in America in the 90s. It was terrible. Tommy, you have an 8-month season and win 13 games. How is that possible? I mean, in there were some 1-win months as an NBA team. Good heavens.
That's incredible. And I mean, there was a team that had so much talent with Tarpley and, with Sam Perkins and Mark Aguirre and Ro Blackman, and the list goes on. And then all of a sudden, after that group was gone, things went really, really bad, until Mark Cuban came in.
Yeah. And, actually, to Ross Perot's credit, Mark Cuban bought an ascending basketball team. He bought a team with a terrific personnel man, Connie Nelson, a terrific veteran head coach, Nelly. He bought a team with Steve Nash, Michael Finley, and Dirk. He bought a team that at least the framework for an outstanding basketball team existed.
Mhm.
Now, it wasn't when he bought it, for sure. I remember, honestly, Tommy, this is way back in the history. Nelly and I did a show every week on the air, and he was the perfect coach for a bad basketball team because he could laugh at himself, he could laugh at his team. He was great. But I remember having lunch with Nelly at the Point over on Lovers Lane in Greenville, right over there, the hamburger place.
Yeah.
And we sat there having lunch one day, and you sort of tiptoe around the fact that you're about to say to the head coach, "Your team really sucks, doesn't it?" you know, and so you sort of introduced that very carefully. And Nelly said to me, "December 28th." And I said, "What?" He said, "December 28th." I said, "What's that, Nelly?" He said, "If I can survive till December 28th without getting fired, I think we'll be okay." The
Wow.
start of the season schedule was horrendous for this young team. And he knew he was going to get his brains beaten out. But he said the schedule gets a lot easier when we get to past December 28th. And by golly, if he wasn't correct, they got through this hard stretch and things started to get better. But he had picked the date on the calendar for his own firing.
Wow. I love Nelly. And I want to, this is Norm's part, but I got to share a funny story with you. I was in San Antonio covering the team for playoffs against the Spurs, and they had just gotten beaten badly. And he came out of the locker room and he said, "Hey, look, I don't want to talk to you guys right now." He said, "We just got our blank beat. But if any of you guys want to join me at the bar across the street, I'll be happy to talk with you all night long." And so Art Garcia from the Star Telegram and a few of us went across the street and joined him and had a beer with Don, and he picked up the tab. And, just one of those fun guys. Not that I knew him great, but he was one of those fun people to talk to on a day-by-day basis. This is the great Norm Hitzges joining us here. Couple more for Norm, and you kind of led into where I was going to go next. We listened to you to get all the news. You host the Jerry Jones Show, the Don Nelson Show, the Johnny Oates Show. I could go on, but I got to ask you, you had some pretty great guests over the years. What was your all-time favorite show to host of the coaches or owner? I guess if you want to include Jerry Jones in that mix, who's your all-time favorite?
Well, you've mentioned one of them already. Nelly was just funny as all get out. Emmett was excellent. After we sat down, and I sat down with Emmett and said, "Hey, if we're going to do about 12 minutes every week, let's make them really good minutes. Give me the best you got, and I'll try to stay on topic. I'll not try to wander off and be a dummy." And he gave some wonderful insights into the game itself, into his career. I love doing Pat Summerall's show all the time. Pat was a regular with us, and Pat was really, really, really fun and funny. He had a dry sense of humor. I remember specifically calling Pat Summerall day after 9/11 because he'd been in New York City on 9/11. And by the way, not terribly far from where the towers went down.
Wow.
And there was no way for him to get out of that area except to walk. So he walked like 35, 40 blocks north to get back to his hotel from where he'd been. I don't know how to separate them, Tommy.
Yeah.
I can remember some funny, wonderful guests over the years. I can remember some fantastic guests over the years. At one point, 4 people tried to climb Mount Everest without oxygen and without Sherpa guides, which is just, I hate to use the word suicidal, but that's pretty close to what it is. And 2 of them had to come back down the mountain. And we had the 2 guys who, one guy made it to the summit and one guy, his partner, stopped short of the summit. And we had them on a phone together for a conversation that, as I recall, lasted 40, 45 minutes. It was unbelievable, talking about this ascent. And the guy that did not go to the summit woke up. They had reached the point where they were 1 day from the summit, and he woke up from a nap, looked outside the enclosure that they built, and he said he looked to the top of the mountain and saw a group of men in purple robes summoning him to come forward. And he came back into the tent and told his partner, I can't go with you today. I can't go with you. This dream I had, this vision I had, I'm being called to my death. And his partner went up, did the last climb, got there, spent like, I don't know, 15 minutes at the top of the mountain, came back down, and the 2 of them climbed back down together. It was just extraordinary. But over the years, the fun guest, the funny guest, the happy guest, this has been a spectacular ride.
Who is the one guest that you've always wanted to have on the Norm Hitzges show that you've never had on?
Oh boy. Well, let's see. I can tick off some thoughts for you. I had Howard Cosell for an hour, which was just outrageous at one point. He did an hour with me. That's unheard of. I think the guest I wish I could have talked to, but never got a chance to talk to on the air. We'd attempt to get him, we just couldn't make schedules work, was Arthur Ashe. He was a spectacular human being, a spectacular thinker, and I love talk to people like that. I'm in awe of people like that, Tommy, and I wish I'd have gotten the chance to speak to Arthur Ashe.
You've been doing the Normathon for years. I've stopped by a few over the years, and especially during my time at the Ticket, to benefit the Austin Street Center. How much has that meant to you in all the money that you've raised to help out that great facility over your long time here in DFW?
You know, Tommy, first of all, it's a huge team effort. It's a massive team effort to do 18 continuous hours of broadcasting, or when it started, 24 continuous hours of broadcasting, and to have incredible stars turn out and spend time with us. The Jordan Spieths and Clayton Kershaws and Lee Trevinos and Troy Aikmans and Roger Staubachs, and I could go on and on and on and on. Head coaches, managers, star athletes. You know, in this life, you hope to make an impact somewhere, even a small one. And the incredible power of the radio station, the incredible power that those guests give to that day of programming has meant an unbelievable, just an unbelievable impact on that shelter. And I don't know how many thousands of lives over the years have been touched and bettered. I do know, Tommy, that over the 19 years, which by the way started with my former producer, Mark Friedman, saying, why don't we call it a Normathon? We could do 24 hours of broadcasting on the air. And I thought, what are you, nuts? Uh,
He's standing right behind me, by the way.
but it turned to something so special. And the shelter has just gotten approved, the next step in zoning, to build an entire new building that they will be able to serve almost 500 people. That is, keep them, shelter them, clothe them, job train them, help them physically, help them if they have substance abuse, help them with jobs, feed them. I don't know if any of that it would be currently possible had they not gotten the influx of cash every year. And that cash now, in just pure cash, Tommy, that doesn't include all the other things that they've gotten. That pure cash now is $6.25 million. And they use it so remarkably.
My very last question for you, and this is a tough one. I'm sure you've probably been asked this or maybe talked about it on the air at some point. If you were building a Mount Rushmore of athletes in DFW, who would be on your list?
Well, I know to use the term athletes, so that would not include people like Tom Landry, who would not be, quote, athlete. It would not include the legendary Tex Schramm, who, if there's one man who scared me ever, it would be him. Tex Schramm actually scared me. When I was starting out as a reporter here, a Tex Schramm could waggle one of those craggy fingers at you with those cold eyes of his, and you thought, that's it. I'm going to wind up buried next to a tree someplace, in an unmarked grave. But I hate to play favorites here. I guess if there's a baseball player, it's Nolan Ryan. I know that others have had longer careers here, like Pudge, but Nolan Ryan was just a wonderful fellow. In football, who would you take here? Would you take Aikman, Smith, Lilly, Staubach, Dorsett, Irvin? I mean, we could go on another 10 minutes here, Tommy, just ticking off Cowboy names.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dirk would have to be there. So Dirk, Nolan, and 2 Cowboys. And maybe the 2 Cowboys I'd take would be maybe Roger and Troy, maybe Emmett and Troy. And
if you're doing hockey, would it be Mike Modano?
It would be Modano. I'm not sure if we were limiting it to 4 faces from the history of sports in this area, but if it were hockey, it would be unquestionably Mike Modano. Goodness gracious, yes, what a great player.
Well, Norm, I guess the only thing I have to say in ending this conversation is thank you. Not just on behalf of me, but on behalf of sports fans in DFW. You have been the man to listen to for many, many years. And, I know I've learned a lot from you in the broadcasting business, having worked with you. And we all will take away a little piece of Norm. But again, thank you for all you've done over the years. And thank you for giving me time here this afternoon.
Tommy, thank you very, very much. And thank you for being a good friend for many, many, many years now.
The one and only, the great Norm Hitzges.